I'm Pat Delgado with Pax Christi El Paso and the Restorative Justice Ministry of the Diocese.
I'm Carmen Rodriguez. I'm with Project Regeneración, and we're a very new organization. We're maybe 1 year old, but we have a history, and maybe I'll mention that later.
Good afternoon, I'm Melissa Atkins-Wardy with YWCA. We are 115 years old, so welcome to the nonprofit party. YWCA's mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and create peace, justice, dignity, and freedom for all. So it's a itty-bitty mission that we play out here in El Paso, all across the nation, and actually all across the world.
Hi, my name is Clara Duffy, and I'm with Abara. And this year is our 5-year anniversary. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Pat, to someone else.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I was very excited to hear Stephen because he's very new to Pax Christi. He's not new to nonviolence. He's new to Pax Christi, though, and he's very good at community organizing. And I think that's part of what I need to learn from him is the work on organizing. Because so what we do here, Pax Christi started after World War II, trying to get the countries in Europe who are adjacent to each other, Germany and France, to communicate with each other and to build bonds, to go back to, to leaving war in the history, but move on. So in El Paso, it started. It really, I guess, maybe around the Iraq War, the protest to that. But I wasn't part of it. I was teaching, but Pax Christi covers so many different areas that it enables somebody like me who's ADHD to get involved in many different, to learn about different movements, whether it's anti-racism, care for creation, anti-nuclear. But one of the big ones is against militarization and against war. And that's what we are focusing on right now because, what's going on is just so dangerous right now, and we're all trying to figure out a way to do something about we're marching really toward nuclear weapons, which are now illegal. So many countries have outlawed them. But so one of the things we do is on Fridays from 12 to 1, we're downtown with sometimes very small. We lost a lot of people, wonderful people during COVID who really can't be out there anymore. And so there's just a small number. And I was thanking one of the young people here today that was at my table. It's so nice to see some of the youth. And we really need to make contact with them because, the mainstream media isn't offering the whole picture. That's what we do on the corner. We try to let people know that there's another side to the story of what's going on. And I would just like to point out, since it is the Peace of Christ, Pax Christi, and we are affiliated, it's Border Peace Presence. It's very interfaith, or people that's not something that's important to, but they are dedicated to promoting peace. And but the church itself has a very bad history, very bad colonial history that we have to do a lot of reparation for. And when I think of what the history of South America, Central America, and North America, the whole colonial history, and even more currently, the Native American residential boarding school history, we have a lot of problems. But I do believe that Pope Francis, even though he can't do everything he would like to do, is trying to plant seeds to show that I mean, he just came back from Southeast Asia, a trip to Muslim countries. He's very interested in interfaith dialogue and promoting that kind of thing. And the other big thing is the synod. He's trying to promote listening circles and dialogue to combat the hierarchy legacy of the church. So, his first thing he did when he was installed was to go to where the migrants, in Italy, right at the tip, where I don't know, 72 migrants had just died and crossing from North Africa. So he's trying to show a different way and very much a welcoming to everybody's welcome at the church, in the church. So that's that piece. Then the other thing is, and he is very much against the death penalty, which is how I got involved with restorative justice. The death penalty, he has declared it inadmissible, because it destroys all hope. And no, we don't have that right to tell people there's no hope for you. You are worth nothing. Even though you're going to live for another 20 years on death row, there's no respect for you because we just put you away. So, in restorative justice has indigenous roots because our criminal justice system is very, it's not just, period. It is, money-making for either politicians or private prisons or, all of that. And it is biased and political and expensive for taxpayers. And but the restorative justice system is based on indigenous cultures where they didn't have a prison to send people to. So they had to work on restoring the bonds that were relationships that were broken and work toward healing and forgiveness, actually. So there are many practices of restorative justice, and part of what we do is some people visit the prisons, some people work on reentry, some parishes or groups do angel tree to support the children of prisoners, and so there's something for everybody, and the table's over there if you want to sign up for anything that you might like to get involved with. Thank you.
I'm going to describe the work that we do as a kind of a healing process. The name of our project is Regeneración, which is regeneration. And the healing is because there is a wound in our city that was very controversial, involved a very controversial issue in recent years, and we were all involved. I might say that 99.9% of you were involved, whether you know it or not. So I'm talking about what happened to the neighborhood of Duranguito. We're talking about peace and violence, and let me ask you if you think that a government who decides that a neighborhood should no longer exist and should be demolished is violence? Do you think that the people that live in that neighborhood who are very comfortable living there, have lived there for many years, are respected when they are not even told in advance of what the government is planning to do? Do you think that the residents of that neighborhood were given a voice or were listened to? And if you think that is not violence, all of these things happened in our community. And the reason I say that they were done, that you were all involved, was because it was done in your name. You as citizens of El Paso, your city government, your city representatives took these actions against this very vulnerable, small neighborhood in our downtown. And I'm sure you've all heard of it. You've heard of it in the news, and you've heard many, many issues related to it. The history, the historical buildings, the way that the vote was taken. If you were a voter, you are also involved because you were asked, although not truthfully, whether you wanted to have a multi-purpose performing arts and cultural center or something like that. And a lot of us said yes. And so later we found out that it wasn't exactly that it was going to be a sports arena. And we didn't know that as voters. However, when we learned it, most of us didn't do anything. We just said, well, oh well, let's see what happens. And of course, the residents had no idea that it would be an arena that was going to replace their neighborhood. So what we decided to do, those of us that were supporting and knew about the issues and had gotten involved, was to try to restore that neighborhood. And that's why Project Regeneración was born. We formed a nonprofit, and what we're trying to do is to restore not only the physical space, because there's broken buildings, and if you go by them, you can see that there are big holes in some of the buildings. There are about 3.5 square blocks of vacant buildings that have been vacant for 7 years or more. Actually, a lot of them have been vacant longer because this started taking place a long time ago when it was being planned back in 2006. So a lot of the residences that were there available for people that were affordable are now gone. And so there it sits, vacant, neglected. Of course, the city says that it's trying to do a lot. It's trying to sell the buildings. It's trying to get people to invest. But there's very little movement. You hear very little about it. The only thing that we've heard is that in November there will be, you will have a chance to vote to see if you want to stop, well, it's more like cancel the bonds that would fund the arena or not. And so you can be involved again. And I'm not going to tell you which way to vote. But that is what's happened in our community. And so we are trying to heal that wound because there is such a need for affordable housing in El Paso. And that place is a place that many people who don't drive, which is good for the environment, who don't have cars and don't want cars, don't have to drive. They can walk to places, they can take the bus. And so they want to live there, they want to stay there. And it's very amenable to having a different kind of lifestyle than driving down the freeway every day and so forth. So that's why we're trying to restore the neighborhood. And what I want to say about what I learned from our speaker was that he was talking about confronting or at least engaging with the other side. And that is really something that we have not done. I have thought about it many times, but there is definitely another side to this story. And they know we are here and we know they are there, and we kind of talk about each other, I'm sure, but we've never engaged, and maybe that's what we need to do.
Yes.
So how does YWCA eliminate racism and empower women. So those are two really big charges for 375 employees in El Paso. We work out of 4 branches and 7 academies for early learning, which are our daycares. Every year we touch 26,000 lives. So we don't have a separate program that eliminates racism. It's baked into everything we do. I have worked very hard with my team to train our staff that eliminating racism is the lens through which we see all things, as is empowering women. So everything from the language we use, how we decorate our offices for the holidays. I run the marketing, I wear many hats at YWCA, but one of the hats I wear is the marketing team. So in our communications and marketing, my team knows if there's 6 people in the picture, 4 of them better be people of color, especially here in El Paso. We were told recently we're using too many Black people in our marketing. So we started using all Black people in our marketing. I'm actually a little surprised that Sarika let me talk today this close to the election and as strongly as I feel about things. So another thing we're doing is doing a Get Out the Vote campaign. All of the materials that I'm talking about, all the programs we do, the teaching we do, where y'all got your lunch, it's set out there, so now you can go feast on the YWCA materials. It's everything from our resolution on how racism is a public health crisis, to our Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event, which is the event where we ask our guys to stand up and be allies to women escaping violence, put on red high heels, do an honorary mile, it's not a real mile, around downtown raising funds for a domestic violence shelter. There's some curriculum there from the lunchbox lessons that we ran, making sure that all the staff was in alignment. Do we understand what racism is? Do we understand what microaggressions are? Do we know how we respond when we see them in real time? Because unfortunately we do. When we're the only white person in the room, do we know to just shut up and listen and absorb? So those materials are out there. The Walk a Mile to Get Out the Vote is tied with Dia de los Muertos. We got a grant from YWCA USA that ties the 2 events together, and I'm gonna be very upfront. My team and I had a little bit of trouble with that because we weren't really sure how they tied together, except that they're November 2nd and November 5th are on the calendar together. So we wanted to make sure that we honored that cultural legacy. We used Mexican-American colleagues to guide us through the design of it. A UTEP alum did the artwork that you'll see on the posters and on the business cards. So with YWCA, when we're empowering women, when we're eliminating racism, it's not a separate class, it's not a separate program, you're not gonna see anything separate on our website, but it's Get Out the Vote, featuring women in the artwork. It's making sure that every woman that we talk to between now and October 7th is registered to vote. So how many women in the room right now are you registered to vote? Okay, have you checked, no, keep your hands up. Come on, girls. Have you checked your registration to make sure you're still active? Because Texas just purged 1 million people from rolls. Okay, yeah, let's sit in that a minute. Texas just purged 1 million voters from their rolls, so you might think that you are active, you might not be. So grab one of our business cards, actually grab 5, because you're gonna keep 1 and you're gonna give 4 to 4 friends, right? Make sure they're all registered to vote. We know what we need to be voting for in order to eliminate racism and empower women. There's some very clear choices ahead of us. Something else we do is a swim equity campaign. We had to come up we had a beautiful opportunity from GECU, one of our funding partners, to do a fundraising campaign in May, and it had to be based on equity. So we were trying to think about what are we gonna do? And it was swim lesson time, summer was coming up, so we started doing some research. Did you know that only 3 out of 5 Hispanic kids know how to swim? And 5 out of 6 Black kids don't know how to swim. Which means 1 Black kid knows how to swim, which means 5 Black kids are at risk of drowning. Black kids drown at times 6 times more than their peers. So it was a really clear equity for us. Guess who has swimming pools and swim lessons at every one of our branches? So we raised $26,000 in a month to offer swim lessons to kids who otherwise do not have access to swim. It is a life-saving skill, it's a necessary skill, and that get the family in the water. How many people, can anyone tell me why would a Black family not know how to swim? Why would they not have pool time as a recreation? because they used to put acid in the pools. When I'm angry, I'm not gonna apologize for it because this is the appropriate reaction to this story. They used to put acid in the pool when black folks would get in the pool. So $26,000 raised by El Pasoans stayed in El Paso to offer swim lessons to black and brown kids who otherwise wouldn't have them. That's how we eliminate racism. How do we empower women? We have the domestic violence shelter. We employ about 350 women in the community. Everything from childcare services to administrative services, taking care of El Pasoans. So when we think of the wisdom and the culture that we pass on to each other, we're preserving our culture as we do that. With our health and wellness programs, 70% of our participants are women 65 and older. Those women would otherwise not have somewhere to go during the day. We provide community centers for them to gather, to congregate, to share stories. They actually have clubs with officers, and one of them is a very specific birthday secretary, that otherwise these women would be alone. Now they're a vibrant part of our community. And the other thing is, YWCA is always open to ideas. So I'm looking at some gorgeous art in the room. I will tell you, our walls at our new administration building and a couple of our renovated branches are a little bare. So maybe we can come up with a program where we highlight and uplift local artists. There's always a way for the YWCA to give back to the community, and that's what we aim for. With the lunchbox lessons, that curriculum's out there on the table. Those are very easy ways to talk to people about racism. I recently had a very large community leader talk to me, and he said, well, Melissa, I don't believe in racism. And I said, well, rich white guy, I'm sure you don't, but baby, racism believes in you. And it actually counts on you to have that exact feeling. But I have found that the most successful way to talk to someone who may or may not understand racism, and that's to be oh, that's racist. But doesn't really open the conversation. So we worked really hard this year within YWCA to figure out how do we open those conversations? How do we build places and centers of trust where we can have those conversations and get to something meaningful? And hopefully that's what you will find from the materials that are on the table. My business cards are there, so if you want to reach out and see how YWCA could work with the groups that you all are in, we would invite that conversation. And whether you're 115 years old or 1 year old, the work that we do in the community is so important. El Paso is such a gorgeous place to live. I'm a transplant. My husband's family has been here for many generations. I'm raising the 5th generation of Bordes in El Paso. But I'm so proud to be here, and thank you for listening today.
Thanks, it was great to listen to you guys. I don't normally speak. I'm standing in for a coworker, so thank you. I'm kind of nervous. So I work with Abara. Abara exists to create space for people to understand better some of the greatest needs and problems we have in the borderlands. I'm paraphrasing our mission because I didn't grab a card, but we do have cards in the back. I loved what Stephen said. Some of the things he said were so profound and obviously come from just years of experience in peacemaking and introspection. And one of my favorite things that he talked about, and that I think we tried to do in Abara as well, was understanding the context from which people are coming, and seeing them as equal to you in value, whether they have the same belief or opinion or not. And that's easier to say than it is to do, because when you have someone in front of you, like you were saying, that says, I don't believe in racism, or I don't think that Duranguito matters, or those people deserve to be killed, I think the easiest thing to do is to just put your walls up or back away. In Abara, we talk about the fight, flight, freeze, and appease reaction that we have when faced with someone that is different from us. And I think that there are spaces like this when we celebrate diversity, and we celebrate difference, and we celebrate inclusivity, and it's a beautiful thing. But how far are we willing to take inclusivity, and how much are we willing to really see our enemies as people who have a Venn diagram of context and experiences and traumas and relationships, people that have taught them to be the way that they are. And obviously that's nuanced, and we don't, in a bar, I mean, we don't tolerate people coming in and expressing racist ideas, or we don't create space for that. But what we do create space for is learning. And so the way that we do that is called Border Encounters, and there's some other groups. I even see some people in the room that do super similar things. We love the Encuentros group, and the immersion that Rosemary does, and we're not the only group doing it, but it's really powerful because we focus on the hospitality that we are able to offer to people before we know them, and before we know how much. Okay, I need like a. Before we know how much they're going to take away from the experience. So our Border Encounter participants come from all over the country, and maybe like 75-80% of them come from Protestant churches. And the reason that they come often is because they or someone in their church group has expressed this kind of discomfort with the way that the Protestant church at large is treating immigration. But a lot of the time they come not exactly knowing very much about El Paso, and people often say to us, oh, like my family member or my friend, my grandmother, they didn't want me to come to El Paso, they thought that it would be dangerous for me. Or they didn't want me to go to Juarez, they thought it would be dangerous. They saw it on the news, there's a Venezuelan gang, there's this, like, there's militarization, like Pat's saying, and we get that all the time, that people are afraid to come here. And our goal in that situation is to emphasize just the normalcy of life here and the beauty and strength that our community has, that is not an exception necessarily on the border. Thank you, I think it passed. It's not that we're such an exceptional community on the border. I'm from a different border community. I'm from the Rio Grande Valley. And just like many other border communities, we have specific strengths and specific challenges. And our participants come and they listen to a variety of talks and workshops. We do one on sustainability with our architect Kim sometimes. We do root causes of migration in Central America and South America, talking about some of the interventionalism, that's not the word, the intervention policies that the US carried out in Latin America that Pat mentioned. We talk about ethical volunteerism, dignified storytelling. When we hear someone's story, how do we honor it, and how do we either share it or not share it based on situation, based on the permission. We take our groups to the Walmart Memorial at Escarate, and we listen to someone who experienced that day. We have them read the names. We talk about what that kind of violence, wow, that 8 minutes went by so fast. What that kind of rhetoric that the shooter had in his manifesto what that does to our binational community, what it did to our binational community in August 2019. And the goal is not necessarily that they would leave and vote differently. The goal is that they will walk away with a truer, wider picture of the border and of immigration, and that they would promote narrative change, that they would tell true stories about the border, and that they would see the beauty and unique, special spirit that we have in El Paso and Juarez, and have learned to be able to share that with their communities. So, thank you.